All right, YouTube, welcome back to the Sideline Report. And today we're going to preview the 2018-2019 NBA season. Now, since the season is so long, I'm not going to predict every single team's record and every single game-by-game thing like I kind of do with the NFL. What I'm going to do is I'm going to predict the major award winners, then we're going to look at the playoff bracket and go through that. So starting things off, we're going to look at who I believe will be the MVP this year. And while it's a pretty common pick amongst a lot of people, I'm going to say it's LeBron James. I think the things he has going for him is he's going to a not very talented, well, it's a very talented team, but it's not a team that has won a lot recently. So when they take off this year, a lot of players around him get better and they go to the playoffs. They're going to see that as him elevating everybody. As well as it's been quite a few years since his last MVP, so I think the LeBron fatigue has kind of started to wear off a little bit. That I think might have caught up to him in a few of those years. So I think he's still the best player in the league, and it's a little bit closer than it used to be, but I still think there's a pretty good margin between him, Kevin, Kawhi, and the other guys. And I think he's going to play a little bit more off-ball this year, too. You have Rajon Rondo, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram who could bring the ball up. They got other guys who can move the ball, Lance Stevenson even, so he could play off the ball and be more of a scoring type of player. He could catch the ball in the low post and attack, kind of like Kobe would do in his later years, and Michael and those kind of guys. So I think he'll be able to score about 30, 31-ish if he wants to, and average maybe one or two less assists. So I think he'll also help Kuzma and those guys get more points. Ingram will probably average like 22. Kuzma could average 22. I think his impact will just be felt, and people will be willing to give him the... If LA is a top 5 or 6 seed in the West, I think voters won't be worried about voting for him. Next up, we're going to look at Defensive Player of the Year, and I think this is the year Anthony Davis gets Defensive Player of the Year. He's always in the running for it, but he hasn't had that Kawhi or like an early Dwight Howard thing where it was unanimous. He's so good at shot blocking, contesting, he gets so many steals. This is a chance for him to continue and establish himself as the next big superstar after LeBron and Kevin Durant. I think this year the Pelicans are going to be about where they were last year. But I think Anthony Davis himself individually is going to have a monstrous year, kind of like he did at the second half of last year. And I think he's going to finish in the top 3 for MVP again, assuming he stays healthy. And I think it's going to be predicated mostly on what he does on defense, because we know he's going to get you 25 and 12 every night offensively. Next up, we're going to look at Rookie of the Year, and this is a bit of a surprise pick, but I'm going to go with Kevin Knox on the Knicks. DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley are the clear-cut favorites. They're the best 2 players coming out of the draft, and Luka Doncic from the Mavericks is another one. But Kevin Knox can get buckets, and he has shown that a lot. He's a pure scorer, and he gets a good amount of rebounds. Kristaps is still injured coming off the knee injury, and I think he won't quite be himself till the very back end of the season. The Knicks themselves will probably be trash. They might make the 8th seed just because the East is pretty top-heavy. But I think regardless, Kevin Knox is going to get his. I could see him averaging about 18 and 9, 18 and 10 type of year. Well, I think Ayton will probably be 15 to 12. Bagley will be around 15 and 8, guys like that. I think that those 2 guys will probably be better long-term players, but I think Knox is going to come out of the gate firing, and I think he could be a surprise pick for Rookie of the Year. Kind of like Mitchell, Brogdon, some of those guys have been in the last few years. And another surprise pick is going to be the most improved player. This one I think it's going to be De'Aaron Fox on the Kings. He came out with a pretty good amount of hype behind him, considering his rivalry with Lonzo Ball. But I think he's a much better player than he probably gets credit for because of that rivalry. Last year, his rookie year wasn't really his best. I don't think it showed all of his skill set. I think he's going to benefit a lot from the drafting of Marvin Bagley. Gives him a guy to run pick and rolls with, a guy down in the paint who could score, get rebounds. He's such an incredibly explosive athlete, how he attacks the basket, his floaters, his ability to change his shot in the air and still finish. He reminds me a lot of kind of how Derrick Rose was before the injuries. The way he could, just the unique ways to finish in the paint with his athleticism and how he could blow by people in open space. I think if he can get a moderate resemblance of a jump shot, just like a mid-range pull-up, so when he drives, he could stop and pull up, kind of like what Westbrook's gotten really good at. And shoot maybe like 30% from 33%, somewhere respectable in there. I think he could have like a 21 and 8 type of season, and I think he's going to be a really, really good player. He won't be an all-star because the West at point guard is loaded, but I think he can establish himself as being one of the next guys to look out for. And last on the awards train is the coach of the year, and I think this year is Brad Stevens' year. He became a superstar coach during last year's playoffs. They even remixed Drake Scott's plans and called it Brad's plan. He took a depleted Celtics team and got them all the way to within one game of the NBA Finals. This year they're fully healthy, bringing back Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum. All those guys got valuable experience last year playing without those guys. I just think it feels like it's his time. It's kind of the opposite of what LeBron was going through with voter fatigue, where they wouldn't give it to him. I think now it's going to be like someone has to give him a reason not to vote for Brad. I think the voters are looking to vote Brad Stevens this year. Now that we got the awards out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the playoff bracket here. When we look at it, you can see I have Golden State as the number 1 seed in the West and Boston as number 1 in the East. Not too big of shocks there. I got Houston as the 2. I got San Antonio as the 3. OKC as the 4. Lakers as the 5. Jazz as the 6. New Orleans as the 7. And Portland is the 8. So looking at the West, I think Golden State's going to run through Portland. Not really an explanation needed there. San Antonio beat the Jazz in a pretty contested 6-game series. I think Donovan Mitchell and DeMar DeRozan will be a pretty good head-to-head matchup, but Popovich is just too good of a coach, and I think San Antonio has a few more offensive weapons and can play good enough defense. I think they're going to be underratedly good this year. Houston's going to run through New Orleans probably 5 games. Anthony Davis could probably get you 1, but Houston's just way too good. Don't need to go too much into that. Probably the best game of the first round will be OKC, or the best series in the first round will be OKC versus the Lakers. I'm going to go with the Lakers in a difficult 6-game series. I think Westbrook and Paul George is formidable for anybody, but I think by this time in the year, LeBron and a lot of those young, talented guys are just going to be on a special kind of roll. I think Ingram's going to have his shot. Lonzo's going to find his role. Kuzma's going to do his thing, and playoff LeBron is still playoff LeBron until proven otherwise. So I think the Lakers will take that one in a tough 6-game series. I don't think there might be one game that's a blowout, but I think they'll all be close. Looking at the East, we got the Boston taking on the Knicks, who I think get in there kind of by default. I think when Kristaps comes back toward the end of the year, him, Kevin Knox, they'll be good enough to win probably like 40 games-ish. I mean, I just don't even know who else to put in that A spot really that I think will be much better. So I'm putting the Knicks there, but Boston's going to run through them 4-game sweep. I can't see the Knicks winning one. As the 2 seed, I actually got Toronto over Philadelphia. I think adding Kawhi and that bench, I think their defense is going to step up a little bit just naturally as it is. When you add a player of Kawhi's caliber, I think they're going to be out there playing with something to prove after what happened last year. So I think Toronto's going to be a force this year. I think they're going to be one of those teams that if you put them in the West, they'd be competitive with anybody. And I think they're going to play the Miami Heat, who I think a lot of the talks have talked about Jimmy Butler going there. And if Jimmy does go there, I think they might even go up from the 7th seed to the 6th seed. For now, I'm putting him in the 7th seed. I think they're very well coached and they have a lot of different talented players. So I'm going to say Toronto takes them out in 4. If Jimmy's there, we'll make it 5, honestly. Jimmy could get you 1 for sure, but otherwise, Miami doesn't have enough to deal with Toronto, especially when Whiteside refuses to even set a screen on offense and really do anything half the time. And at the 3 seed, I got Philadelphia taking on the 6 seed Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee's going to be pretty good. I don't think they have enough complementary pieces around Giannis. I think he's going to be a transcendental, perennial all-star type player. But I don't think he's in that LeBron, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis territory where he can take a bunch of scrubs and carry them. So I think Philly's going to win this comfortably 5, maybe 6 games, depending, because they were a really tough team early last year for that Boston team. So we'll go 4-2, actually, Philadelphia. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons will be a little too much to handle. And next I got Indiana as the 4 seed taking on Washington as the 5 seed. I think Indiana, Victor Oladipo is not going to surprise anybody this year. Miles Turner definitely has to step his game up. I just don't see them being that much better than last year. I like Aaron Holiday coming in and joining the squad. But I think this year with John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Dwight Howard, I think Dwight's going to go back not to his Orlando days, but maybe he'll look a little bit like those LA Lakers / Houston Rocket days when he was not at his peak, but he was still a very, very viable player, maybe a 17 and 12 type of guy. Him coming off those pick and rolls with John Wall should be fun to watch. And I think getting Gortat out of there is an addition by subtraction. He seemed to cause a lot of issues with him and Wall not being able to work it out. So I'm going to say Washington takes it in a Competitive 6, maybe a dogfight 7. I don't think either one's that much better, but Washington just has a few more talented players, is what I'm thinking. So as we move on to the second round, we got what is usually a doozy year in and year out. Golden State taking on San Antonio. I think the San Antonio team, like I said during the first round look, is a lot more. It's going to be a lot more competitive than people think. But this Golden State juggernaut's going to have too much for him. Nobody on there is going to be able to check Boogie, even if he's only 80%. Without Kawhi, no one could stop KD. I think DeRozan will still get you some. He'll get his 20-ish points, but I think he's going to be a little. He's not going to be as efficient just because Golden State's going to key in on him. LaMarcus has shown he can get his, and it doesn't really affect the game that much. He can score an empty 30, but when you really need him, you don't see a whole lot from him. He's more of a complimentary star. And then no DeJounte Murray for the year, I think, is what really hurts him in this series. So I'm going to say Golden State takes him in 5, but I don't think it's a... I think a few of those games are at least competitive, but Golden State just has way too much firepower. Next, we got the surprise Lakers taking on the Houston Rockets. I think this will be another one. I feel like the Lakers, every game they're in is going to be the best game of that round, or the best series of that round, sorry. I think no one in Houston can check LeBron, especially without Trevor Ariza being there, without Luke Mbamute. Chris Paul and James Harden are going to go off regardless. And then Carmelo's an X factor. Clint Capella's an X factor. Like, what can they do against? No one on the Lakers can really match up with Clint besides JaVale, and JaVale's he's more known for his Shaq and a Fool Day stuff than he is other stuff he does on the court. So I'm actually going to go with the Lakers. Like I said in round 1, I think LeBron's going to be in playoff mode, and these young players are going to be clicking and find their roles. Plus, you got playoff battle-hardened veterans like Rajon Rondo and Lance Stevenson there. Plus, there's a good chance they make a move by the deadline that we don't know about that adds another really big-name player there. So I'm going to go with the Lakers in a 7-game dogfight. I think it's going to be one of those where nobody loses at home until Game 7. I think I trust playoff LeBron more than playoff CP3 or playoff Harden. And that's if Harden or CP3 doesn't get hurt, because they have shown to either get hurt or to disappear in the playoffs. So I'm going to go with the Lakers. Moving on to the East, we got Boston taking on the Wizards. This has been a pretty good rivalry the last few years. It's probably not going to be as much this year because a lot of those players, probably like Marcus Smart, Markieff Morris, a lot of those guys, it's been a big rivalry kind of the last few years. But I think this Boston team's entirely too deep, entirely too talented. Kyrie's going to go off. Gordon Hayward's going to go off. Jason Tatum. I think it's going to be high-scoring games all the way through. Washington, I think, will get blown out twice. Just games are not shooting well. John Wall gets a little erratic. Boston will win in 6, but I think when they lose 2, they're never really in any danger. Like Boston will be up 3-1, lose a game, then finish in 6. Next, we got a fun one, and it's the Philadelphia 76ers are taking on the Toronto Raptors led by Kawhi. This is an interesting matchup because Joel Embiid and Valanciunas, clearly Joel Embiid wins that matchup, but Valanciunas takes a little bit out of him. Kyle Lowry, Ben Simmons wins it, but Kyle Lowry's going to get his on offense because Ben Simmons, you can guard him with Serge Ibaka realistically because he's not threatening you from the outside. And then Kyle Lowry on offense, if you guard him with Ben Simmons, he can run around Ben. And you could put someone like Robert Covington on Kawhi, but Kawhi's still going to go off. That leaves Kawhi as basically free, doesn't have to guard anybody really. Nobody on Philly requires him to spend much energy on defense, so I think Toronto just has a better matchup potential here. Philadelphia might be the more talented team and the better fit for a long-term dominance, but I think right now until Ben Simmons proves he can shoot from the outside and some of those younger guys prove they can beat you without Ben assisting basically. Basically for me, the key in this game will be Markelle Fultz. If we get that Washington Markelle Fultz, I think this is a 7-game dogfight where it could go either way. But if we don't see that guy necessarily, if we see him used more like he was last year, I think it's an easy one for the Raptors. I'm going to say the Raptors in a hard 6 because I think Fultz will be pretty good. I just don't know if he'll get the opportunities to take over enough games, and if he does, it'll be too late. So we'll go Toronto in 6. And looking at the Western Conference Finals, we got what we all are hoping for realistically is the Golden State Warriors take on the LA Bron Lakers. I really want to pick the LeBron Lakers because LeBron just plays in the finals. That's kind of what he does, but I just can't do it. Golden State is the best assembled starting five of all time with a pretty good bench. And LeBron's one man, and he's had trouble dealing with this super deep team as any superstar of all time would. I think he'll be able to take something. I think he'll be able to get his for sure. I think Ingram, Kuzma, guys like that can run a lot of switches. They can guard multiple positions. They can get their own shot, so LeBron doesn't have to be in charge of everything. He can go to the bench occasionally. I think this is a much better matchup than those Cleveland teams he's had since 2016 against Golden State, but I can't see them beating Golden State. I'm going to say it's a heavy dogfight of a game. I've said dogfight a lot, but I think this is the epitome of it. I think Golden State wins in 7 games. I think they just prove too much, and I think playing at the Oracle 4 times just proves difficult for anyone to win. So I'm going to say Golden State in 7, but LeBron definitely shows that this team will be a force to be reckoned with as long as he's there and playing even 90% of what he's capable of. And in the East, we got the Celtics taking on the Raptors. I really like the Raptors with Kawhi. I think Kawhi can take away a Tatum or a Hayward or a Kyrie. That his ability to lock somebody up is such an X factor. And Kyle Lowry's pretty nasty. He's a pit bull. You could put him on one of those guys too. He probably won't stop him, but he'll make him earn it. I just think Boston's too deep. They run like 9 deep with starter quality guys. You'll have Morris, Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart. Their bench is better than a lot of these other East team starters. So I'm going to say Boston in 6, but I think Toronto keeps every single game close. And then we look at probably the obvious finals that everyone is expecting as the Warriors take on the Celtics. And I love this matchup because they are both built very similarly as far as multiple positionless, small forward guards, centers that could play forwards, just positionless basketball. The difference is Golden State is so bloody talented. You have Boogie, Cousins, Dre. Their starting five are all perennial all-stars. They're all some of the best at what they do all time, let alone just right now. I think Boston has a better coach. Brad Stevens might not be the better coach, but I think his coaching will at least balance this out. His ability to design plays to attack Steve Kerr, well, not attack him, but his ability to design plays to attack the Warriors and what Steve Kerr calls. I think it's going to be close, but it's hard not to pick Golden State in 6. It's an obvious prediction, honestly. It'd be they're probably the biggest favorites to win ever. I don't know the exact odds, but it's hard to pick against them. I think Boston makes it close, and I think this Boston team's going to win a title. Even if Kyrie leaves, I think this Boston team will be good enough to win a title in the next couple years. But everything's lined up for Golden State to win this year. They're the best assembled team I've ever seen, at least on paper. They could be absolutely terrible when the season actually starts, but I can't see it. I think the MVP, I think this will be the year Steph Curry finally gets an MVP. I think he's going to average 30. I think they're going to set up plays for him to get his, and I think it's going to be not leave a doubt. I think Jaylen Brown and a lot of those guys are going to be able to. They're not going to stop Kevin Durant, but they're going to disrupt him enough from going off for 40 points like he did the last 2 finals. So there you have it. I got the obvious pick as everyone else. No surprise. Golden State beating the Celtics in 6. This has been my NBA 2018-2019 season predictions. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll continue to do different videos on the NBA, the NFL, and various other sports throughout the year. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. I like to tweet during games, and sometimes I like to have a little fun with it. So thanks for tuning in. Feel free to subscribe and like the video. Okay, bye.